The morning mist hung thick over the cobblestone courtyard of Raven's Hollow Estate when Captain Marcus Blackwood received the urgent summons. The royal messenger's horse was still steaming from the hard ride, and the young man's face was pale with exhaustion and worry. "Captain, you must come at once," the messenger gasped, barely able to catch his breath. "Lady Cordelia's estate has been compromised. The crown requires your immediate attention." Marcus fastened his sword belt and grabbed his leather coat. As the kingdom's most trusted investigator, he had handled many delicate matters for the royal family, but something in the messenger's voice suggested this was different. More serious, more dangerous. The ride to Lady Cordelia's estate took 2 hours through winding forest paths. Raven's Hollow had always been one of the most beautiful properties in the kingdom of Valdoria, with its ancient stone walls covered in ivy and gardens that bloomed year-round. But as Marcus approached the main gates, he noticed something was terribly wrong. Royal guards surrounded the property like a fortress. Their red and gold uniforms stood out sharply against the green landscape, and their faces were grim with concentration. This was not a simple investigation. This was a siege. Sir Edmund Greycliffe, the head of the Royal Guard, met Marcus at the entrance. Edmund was a man of few words, but his weathered face told stories of countless battles and secret missions. Today, however, he looked more troubled than Marcus had ever seen him. "Thank the heavens you're here, Blackwood," Edmund said, his voice low and urgent. "We have a situation that could shake the very foundations of the kingdom." Marcus dismounted his horse and handed the reins to a waiting guard. "What exactly has happened here, Edmund?" "The messenger said Lady Cordelia's estate was compromised, but he gave no details." Edmund looked around nervously, making sure no one else could hear their conversation. 3 nights ago, Lady Cordelia discovered that several items were missing from her private collection. Not just any items, Marcus. We're talking about the lost heirlooms of Queen Isabella. The blood drained from Marcus's face. Queen Isabella had been the beloved ruler of Valdoria nearly 200 years ago. Her sudden death had led to decades of civil war, and many of her personal treasures had disappeared during the chaos. For generations, historians and treasure hunters had searched for these legendary artifacts, but most people believed they were lost forever. "Are you certain these were the genuine articles?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Lady Cordelia has documentation proving their authenticity. Her family has been the secret guardians of these treasures for 8 generations. The current queen herself didn't know they still existed until Lady Cordelia contacted the palace 3 days ago." Edmund led Marcus toward the main house, a magnificent structure that had stood for over 300 years. The building's stone walls were thick and strong, built to withstand both time and attack. Windows with intricate stained glass patterns cast colorful shadows on the ground, but today the beauty felt ominous rather than welcoming. "What exactly was taken?" Marcus inquired as they walked. "The crown of starlight, Queen Isabella's personal tiara made from diamonds and rare blue sapphires, the scepter of truth, which was said to reveal lies when held by a rightful ruler, and most importantly, the ring of binding, which according to legend could unite the warring factions of the kingdom under one true leader." Marcus whistled low. These weren't just valuable artifacts. They were symbols of ultimate royal authority. In the wrong hands, they could be used to challenge the current queen's legitimacy or start another civil war. "Any signs of forced entry?" Marcus asked as they reached the front door. "That's the strangest part," Edmund replied, pulling out a heavy iron key. "No broken windows, no damaged locks, no signs of violence anywhere. It's as if someone simply walked in and took what they wanted." The inside of Lady Cordelia's mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. Portraits of noble ancestors lined the walls, and expensive furniture filled every room. Crystal chandeliers hung from painted ceilings, and Persian rugs covered polished wooden floors. Everything spoke of old money and ancient tradition. Lady Cordelia herself was waiting for them in the main library. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and intelligent green eyes that missed nothing. Despite the crisis, she maintained the dignity and composure expected of nobility. "Captain Blackwood," she said, rising from her chair near the fireplace, "I'm grateful you've come. This situation is far more complex than anyone realizes." "My lady," Marcus replied with a respectful bow, "I understand some very important items have gone missing from your collection." Lady Cordelia nodded gravely. "Important is an understatement, Captain. These artifacts have been in my family's protection since the Great War ended. We've kept them safe through invasions, revolutions, and countless attempts by treasure seekers to find them." She led them to a section of the library where several bookcases had been moved aside, revealing a hidden door behind them. The door was made of solid steel and required 3 different keys to open. Inside was a small room with thick stone walls and no windows. "This is where the heirlooms were kept," Lady Cordelia explained, gesturing to 3 empty pedestals in the center of the room. The security measures were extensive. Only 3 people knew the combination to this vault: myself, my late husband, and my trusted butler, Henry. Marcus examined the vault carefully. The lock showed no signs of being forced or picked. The steel door was unmarked and undamaged. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't a typical burglary. "When did you first notice the items were missing?" Marcus asked. 3 nights ago, I came to check on them as I do every week. The vault was sealed properly, but the pedestals were empty. I immediately contacted the palace, and they sent word to you." "Who else has access to your home?" Lady Cordelia thought for a moment. "Besides Henry and myself, there are 3 housemaids, a cook, 2 gardeners, and a stable boy. All of them have worked for my family for many years. I trust them completely." But Marcus knew that in cases like this, trust could be a dangerous thing. People could be bought, threatened, or fooled into helping criminals without even realizing it. "I'll need to interview all of your staff," Marcus said, "and I'll want to examine every inch of this property." Edmund cleared his throat. "There's something else you should know, Blackwood. Word of the theft has already begun to spread. There are rumors in the capital that someone is planning to use these artifacts to challenge Queen Victoria's right to rule." This was Marcus's greatest fear. The kingdom had enjoyed peace and prosperity for decades under Queen Victoria's wise leadership. But there were always those who remembered the old days, who believed the kingdom should be ruled differently, or who simply wanted power for themselves. "Do we have any suspects?" Marcus asked. "Several," Edmund replied grimly. "Lord Mortimer Blackthorne has been questioning the Queen's policies lately and has significant wealth and influence. Duke Sebastian Ashworth still claims his family has a better right to the throne. And there are whispers about a secret organization called the Circle of Shadows that wants to restore the old ways of governing." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The Circle of Shadows was more than just a rumor. He had encountered their work before, though he had never been able to prove their existence. They were said to be a group of nobles and merchants who believed the kingdom should return to the feudal system, where powerful lords controlled their own territories without interference from a central monarch. "Have you increased security around the Queen?" Marcus asked. "Of course," Edmund replied, "but we need to recover those artifacts before someone tries to use them. The people of Valdoria still believe in the old legends. If someone appears with the crown of starlight and claims to be the true ruler, it could cause panic and confusion." Lady Cordelia looked worried. "There's something else I haven't told you, Captain. The night before the theft, I saw lights moving around the estate grounds. I thought it might be poachers or vagrant travelers, so I didn't investigate. But now I wonder if someone was watching the house, learning our routines." This was valuable information. Marcus made a mental note to search the grounds for any evidence of surveillance or reconnaissance. "I'll need to see your staff records," Marcus said. "And I want to know about any recent visitors, deliveries, or unusual activities around the estate." As they left the vault, Marcus's mind was already working through the possibilities. This wasn't a random crime. Someone had planned this theft very carefully, and they had inside knowledge of the estate's security measures. The question was whether they were dealing with a professional thief working for money, or something much more dangerous. The afternoon sun was beginning to set as Marcus began his investigation in earnest. He interviewed each member of Lady Cordelia's household staff, paying close attention to their reactions and looking for any signs of nervousness or deception. Henry the butler was a man in his 70s who had worked for the family for over 40 years. His loyalty was unquestionable, and his grief over the theft seemed genuine. The housemaids were young women from the nearby village who had been carefully selected for their trustworthiness. The cook was a widow whose husband had served in the royal army, and she spoke passionately about her loyalty to the crown. But it was when Marcus interviewed Thomas, one of the gardeners, that he noticed something interesting. The young man was nervous and kept looking away when asked direct questions. His hands shook slightly, and he stumbled over his words when describing his activities during the past week. "Thomas," Marcus said gently, "is there something you need to tell me? I'm not here to get anyone in trouble, but I need to know the truth about what happened." The gardener looked around nervously, as if he was afraid someone might be listening. Finally, he took a deep breath and spoke in a whisper. "Captain, I saw something strange 3 nights ago. I was working late in the rose garden when I noticed a figure moving near the house. It was too dark to see clearly, but they seemed to know exactly where they were going." "Why didn't you report this?" Marcus asked. "I thought it might be Lady Cordelia or Henry checking on something. But the figure was too tall to be Lady Cordelia, and Henry never goes outside that late. I should have investigated, but I was afraid." This was the first real clue Marcus had found. Someone had indeed been on the estate the night of the theft, and they had moved with confidence and purpose. "Did you see which direction they went?" Marcus inquired. "Toward the main house, sir. They disappeared around the east wing, and I didn't see them again." Marcus thanked Thomas and continued his investigation. He examined the east wing of the house carefully, looking for any signs of entry or disturbance. The windows were all secure, and there were no scratches or marks on the walls that might indicate someone had climbed up. But then he noticed something odd. One of the basement windows had been recently cleaned, while all the others were still dusty from the recent spring rains. Someone had been careful to remove any evidence of their passage, but they had forgotten this small detail. The basement itself was filled with storage rooms and servant quarters. Most areas were dusty and obviously unused, but Marcus found one room that showed signs of recent activity. The floor had been swept clean, and there were scuff marks on the walls where something heavy had been moved. In the corner of the room, Marcus discovered something that made his heart race. A small piece of black cloth was caught on a nail, as if someone had torn their clothing while moving through the area in darkness. The cloth was made of expensive material, not something a common thief would wear. As night fell over Raven's Hollow estate, Marcus gathered his findings and prepared to report back to Edmund. The theft of Queen Isabella's heirlooms was clearly the work of someone with detailed knowledge of the property and significant resources. But this was only the beginning of what promised to be a complex and dangerous investigation. The fate of the kingdom might very well depend on recovering those ancient artifacts before they could be used to threaten the peace and stability that Queen Victoria had worked so hard to maintain. Marcus knew that somewhere in the shadows, powerful enemies were moving their pieces across the board of politics and power. The game had begun, and the stakes could not be higher. Captain Marcus Blackwood spent a restless night at the inn in Millbrook Village, the small town closest to Lady Cordelia's estate. His mind kept returning to the piece of expensive black cloth he had found in the basement. Someone wealthy and sophisticated had orchestrated this theft, but their identity remained a mystery wrapped in shadows. The next morning brought unexpected developments. A royal messenger arrived at dawn with disturbing news from the capital. During the night, pamphlets had appeared throughout the city claiming that Queen Victoria was not the rightful ruler of Valdoria. The pamphlets bore the seal of the Circle of Shadows and declared that the true heir would soon reveal themselves with proof of their legitimacy. Marcus dressed quickly and rode back to Ravenshollow estate. The situation was escalating faster than anyone had anticipated. If the Circle of Shadows was indeed behind the theft, they were moving with dangerous speed and confidence. Sir Edmund was waiting for him at the estate gates, his face grim with worry. "Blackwood, we've received reports from across the kingdom. Similar pamphlets have appeared in every major town and city. Someone is preparing for a coordinated challenge to the crown." "Any word from Queen Victoria?" Marcus asked as they walked toward the main house. "Her Majesty is secure in the palace, but she's concerned about the stability of the realm. She's given us unlimited authority to recover the heirlooms and identify the conspirators. We must act quickly before this situation spirals out of control." Inside the mansion, Lady Cordelia was meeting with a man Marcus didn't recognize. He was tall and distinguished, with graying hair and intelligent eyes. His clothing was expensive but understated, suggesting nobility without ostentation. "Captain Blackwood," Lady Cordelia said as they entered, "may I present Professor Alexander Whitmore from the Royal Academy of History. He's an expert on Queen Isabella's reign and the artifacts that were stolen." Professor Whitmore rose and extended his hand. "Captain, I've heard great things about your investigative work. I fear we're dealing with something far more complex than a simple theft." "How so, Professor?" Marcus inquired, settling into a chair near the fireplace. "The crown of starlight, the scepter of truth, and the ring of binding weren't just royal treasures," Whitmore explained. "According to ancient texts, they were created as a set by the court magician Aldrich the Wise. Legend says that when brought together and worn by someone of royal blood during a full moon, they can reveal the true heir to the throne." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. "And when is the next full moon?" 5 days from now," Whitmore replied gravely. "If someone is planning to use these artifacts to challenge Queen Victoria's legitimacy, they'll likely act then." This timeline explained the urgency behind the theft and the appearance of the pamphlets. The conspirators weren't just stealing treasures for money, they were preparing for a magical ritual that could throw the entire kingdom into chaos. "Professor," Marcus said, "in your research, have you come across any historical figures who might have legitimate claims to the throne? Anyone whose descendants might believe they have a right to rule?" Whitmore opened a leather portfolio and spread several documents across the table. "That's precisely what I've been investigating. During the civil wars that followed Queen Isabella's death, several noble families claimed royal blood. Most of these claims were resolved or disproven over time, but 3 families maintained their assertions into the modern era." He pointed to 3 family trees drawn on yellowed parchment. "The Blackthorn family claims descent from Queen Isabella's younger brother, Prince Marcus. The Ashworth family insists they're related through Queen Isabella's sister, Princess Eleanor. And most interesting of all, the Ravencroft family has documentation suggesting they're direct descendants of Queen Isabella herself through a secret marriage." "The Ravencrofts?" Edmund asked with surprise. "I thought that family died out decades ago." "So did everyone else," Whitmore replied. "But my research suggests there may be surviving members living in exile abroad. If someone from the Ravencroft line has returned to claim the throne, they would have the strongest legal argument of all the potential claimants." Marcus studied the documents carefully. The historical records were complex and sometimes contradictory, but the patterns were clear. Throughout Valdoria's history, there had always been those who questioned the royal succession and believed they deserved power. Have you shared this information with anyone else? Marcus asked. Only with Lady Cordelia and now with you, Whitmore assured him. I understand the sensitivity of the situation. A sudden commotion outside interrupted their conversation. Through the window, Marcus could see a carriage approaching the estate at high speed. The vehicle was elegant and expensive, drawn by 4 magnificent black horses. As it came to a stop in the courtyard, Marcus recognized the coat of arms painted on the door. Lord Mortimer Blackthorne, Edmund muttered. What's he doing here? Lady Cordelia looked concerned. Lord Blackthorne has never visited my estate before. His arrival now seems highly suspicious. Marcus and Edmund went outside to greet the unexpected visitor. Lord Blackthorne was a man in his 50s with dark hair streaked with silver and cold blue eyes that seemed to see everything. He was accompanied by 2 servants and a man who looked more like a bodyguard than a traditional attendant. Lady Cordelia, Lord Blackthorne said with exaggerated politeness as he stepped down from his carriage. I hope you don't mind my unexpected visit. I heard about your recent difficulties and wanted to offer my assistance. How kind of you, Lord Blackthorne, Lady Cordelia replied carefully, though I'm not sure how you learned of my private matters. Blackthorne smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. News travels quickly in noble circles, my lady. The theft of valuable family heirlooms is certainly a matter of concern for all of us who treasure our heritage. Marcus stepped forward. Lord Blackthorne, I'm Captain Blackwood, investigating this case for the Crown. Perhaps you could tell us where you were 3 nights ago? The nobleman's eyes narrowed slightly. How direct of you, Captain. I was at my estate hosting a dinner party for several prominent citizens. I can provide you with a complete guest list if necessary. That won't be necessary at this time, Marcus replied, though he made a mental note to verify the alibi later. But I am curious about your interest in this particular theft. As you said, it involves private family heirlooms. All noble families share certain interests, Captain, Blackthorne said smoothly. We're concerned about the security of our historical treasures and the stability of our traditions. The conversation continued for several minutes, with Lord Blackthorne asking probing questions about the investigation while revealing nothing about his own activities. Marcus found the man's behavior suspicious, but he had no evidence to support his suspicions. After Blackthorne departed, promising to stay in touch about developments in the case, Marcus, Edmund, and Lady Cordelia gathered in the library to discuss the visit. He was fishing for information, Edmund observed, trying to learn how much we know about the theft and the stolen artifacts. More than that, Marcus added. He wanted to know if we had identified any suspects. A guilty man often returns to the scene of his crime to assess the investigation's progress. Professor Whitmore, who had remained quietly in the background during Blackthorne's visit, now spoke up. There's something else you should know about Lord Blackthorne. My research indicates that his family has been collecting ancient artifacts for generations. They have a private museum in their castle that rivals the royal collection. Interesting, Marcus mused. A man with the resources to plan a sophisticated theft and the motivation to seek royal artifacts. That afternoon, Marcus decided to expand his investigation beyond Raven's Hollow estate. He rode to the village of Millbrook and began asking questions about recent strangers or unusual activities in the area. The village blacksmith, a burly man named Robert, had noticed something interesting. Captain, about a week ago, a group of well-dressed travelers passed through town. They claimed to be merchants, but they didn't carry the right kind of goods. Their wagon was too heavy for normal trade items. How many people were in this group? Marcus asked. 4 men, all wearing fine clothing but trying to look ordinary. They asked a lot of questions about the roads to Raven's Hollow estate and the local work schedules, said they were interested in buying property in the area. The innkeeper, a talkative woman named Margaret, had additional information. Those same men stayed here one night. They paid well and kept to themselves, but I overheard them talking about timing and coordination. They seemed to be planning something that required precise scheduling. Marcus also learned that strange lights had been seen in the forest near the estate on multiple nights over the past 2 weeks. Local farmers had assumed poachers were hunting deer, but now Marcus suspected something more sinister. As evening approached, Marcus returned to the estate with a clearer picture of the conspiracy. This wasn't the work of opportunistic criminals. A well-funded and organized group had spent weeks surveilling the property and planning their approach. They had inside knowledge of the security measures and enough sophistication to execute a nearly perfect theft. But even the most careful criminals made mistakes, and Marcus was determined to find them. That night, he decided to conduct his own surveillance of the estate grounds. If the thieves had left other clues behind, darkness might reveal what daylight had hidden. He positioned himself in the forest overlooking the main house and settled in to watch and wait. Hours passed quietly, with only the normal sounds of the countryside breaking the silence. But around midnight, Marcus noticed something unusual. A faint light appeared in one of the upper windows of the east wing, the same area where the basement window had been cleaned. The light moved slowly from room to room, as if someone was searching for something. Marcus waited and watched, trying to determine if this was Lady Cordelia checking her property or an intruder who had returned to the scene of the crime. The light disappeared for several minutes, then reappeared in the basement windows. Someone was definitely inside the estate, and they were looking for something they hadn't found during the original theft. Marcus moved carefully through the forest, approaching the house from the side where he had found the torn cloth. He could see a faint glow emanating from the basement, and he heard the soft sounds of movement within. Drawing his sword, Marcus crept toward the basement window. Through the glass, he could see a cloaked figure moving systematically through the storage rooms, opening boxes and examining their contents. The person wore dark clothing and moved with practiced stealth, suggesting this was not their first time burglarizing a noble estate. Marcus circled around to the main entrance of the house, hoping to intercept the intruder when they tried to leave. But as he reached the front door, he heard horses approaching in the distance. Someone else was coming to the estate, and their timing suggested coordination with the basement intruder. 3 riders emerged from the forest, their faces hidden by dark hoods. They dismounted quickly and moved toward the house with military precision. These weren't common thieves. They were professionals working together as a team. Marcus faced a difficult decision. He could attempt to apprehend the basement intruder, but that would alert the 3 newcomers to his presence. Or he could observe and try to learn more about the conspiracy, risking that the criminals would escape with additional stolen goods. He chose to watch and gather intelligence. From his hiding place behind a stone garden wall, Marcus observed as the 3 riders entered the house through a side door, suggesting they had a key or inside assistance. The operation was running like clockwork, with everyone knowing their role and timing. Minutes later, all 4 figures emerged from the house carrying what appeared to be documents and small objects. They moved quickly to their horses and prepared to depart, but one of them stopped and looked directly at Marcus's hiding place. "Someone's watching us," the figure said in a low voice. "I can feel eyes on us from the garden." Marcus held his breath and gripped his sword tighter. Had he been discovered, or was this just paranoia on the part of the criminals? "Search the grounds," another voice commanded. "We can't afford to leave witnesses." The 4 figures spread out across the estate, moving toward Marcus's position with systematic precision. He was outnumbered and outmaneuvered, facing enemies who seemed to have extensive training in stealth and combat. As the first searcher approached his hiding place, Marcus knew his peaceful observation had come to an end. The investigation was about to become a fight for his life, and the outcome would determine whether the conspiracy behind Queen Isabella's stolen heirlooms would remain hidden in the shadows or finally be exposed to the light of justice. The mysterious figures were closing in, and Marcus could hear their careful footsteps on the gravel paths. Whatever happened next would change everything about this case, and possibly the future of the kingdom itself. Captain Marcus Blackwood pressed himself against the cold stone of the garden wall as the four cloaked figures spread out across Lady Cordelia's estate. Their movements were precise and coordinated, like soldiers executing a well-rehearsed battle plan. Marcus knew he had only moments before they discovered his hiding place. The first searcher was approaching from the east, moving methodically between the rose bushes and ornamental trees. Marcus could hear the soft crunch of gravel under careful footsteps. He needed to act quickly, but 4 against 1 were impossible odds, especially when his enemies seemed to have military training. Then fortune provided an unexpected opportunity. A barn owl hooted loudly from a nearby tree, and at the same moment a rabbit darted across the lawn. The searcher turned toward these natural sounds, giving Marcus the chance to move silently toward the house. He slipped through the shadows cast by ancient oak trees, keeping low and moving only when the searchers were looking in other directions. His destination was the main house, where he hoped to find Sir Edmund or alert Lady Cordelia to the danger. But as Marcus reached the side entrance, he discovered something that chilled him to the bone. The door was standing open, and he could hear muffled voices inside. More conspirators were already in the house, and Lady Cordelia might be in terrible danger. Drawing his sword, Marcus entered the mansion as quietly as possible. The voices were coming from the direction of the library, and he could make out at least 3 different speakers engaged in heated discussion. "The documents weren't where you said they would be," an angry voice was saying. "Lady Cordelia must have moved them after the first theft." "Keep looking," commanded another voice that sounded familiar to Marcus. "Those papers are essential to our plan. Without proof of the Ravencroft bloodline, the artifacts alone won't be enough to convince the people." Marcus crept closer to the library, staying in the shadows of the hallway. Through a crack in the partially open door, he could see Lady Cordelia tied to a chair, looking frightened but unharmed. 3 figures in dark clothing were searching through her desk and filing cabinets, tossing papers and books aside carelessly. One of the intruders removed his hood, revealing a face that made Marcus's blood run cold. It was Professor Alexander Whitmore, the historian who had claimed to be helping with the investigation. His scholarly demeanor had been replaced by cold calculation and ruthless determination. "Lady Cordelia," Whitmore said in a voice devoid of the warmth he had shown earlier, "you're making this much more difficult than necessary. We know your family has been guarding more than just Queen Isabella's artifacts. You also have the documents that prove the Ravencroft family's rightful claim to the throne." Lady Cordelia lifted her chin defiantly. "Even if such documents existed, I would never help you destroy the legitimate government of Valdoria." "The government is not legitimate," Whitmore replied coldly. "Queen Victoria's family usurped power that rightfully belongs to the Ravencroft line. We're here to correct a historical injustice." "You're here to start a civil war," Lady Cordelia shot back. "The kingdom has known peace and prosperity for decades. Your selfish ambitions would destroy the lives of countless innocent people." Marcus had heard enough. The conspiracy was even more dangerous than he had imagined. These weren't just thieves stealing valuable artifacts. They were revolutionaries planning to overthrow the crown using a combination of ancient relics and forged historical documents. But before he could decide on a course of action, a hand fell heavily on his shoulder. Marcus spun around to face the 4th intruder, who had somehow circled behind him. "Well, well," the man said with a nasty smile. "Captain Marcus Blackwood, the Crown's famous investigator. You've been causing us quite a bit of trouble." The man was tall and muscular, with scars on his hands that suggested extensive combat experience. His eyes were cold and calculating, and he held a long dagger with practiced ease. "You're going to drop that sword and join Lady Cordelia," the man continued. "Any resistance will result in unfortunate consequences for both of you." Marcus weighed his options quickly. The man was clearly dangerous, but Marcus had survived many fights through quick thinking rather than brute force. He appeared to comply, slowly lowering his sword toward the floor. But instead of dropping the weapon, Marcus suddenly lunged forward, driving the hilt of his sword into the man's stomach. As his attacker doubled over in pain, Marcus grabbed the man's dagger and struck him on the head with the sword's pommel. The intruder collapsed unconscious to the floor. The commotion alerted the conspirators in the library. Marcus heard rapid footsteps and shouted orders as they prepared to investigate the disturbance. He had perhaps 30 seconds before they discovered their fallen comrade and realized they were under attack. Marcus quickly bound the unconscious man with curtain cord, then positioned himself beside the library door. When the first conspirator emerged to investigate, Marcus struck him down with the pommel of his sword. The second man was more cautious, but Marcus managed to disarm him after a brief struggle. That left only Professor Whitmore in the library with Lady Cordelia. Marcus entered the room with his sword raised, ready for any treachery. "It's over, Whitmore," Marcus announced. "Your accomplices are captured, and royal guards will be here soon." But the professor seemed remarkably calm for a man whose conspiracy had just collapsed around him. "I don't think you understand the full situation, Captain. This operation involves more people than you realize." As if summoned by his words, the sound of many horses thundered into the estate courtyard. Marcus looked through the window and saw at least a dozen riders in dark clothing surrounding the house. The 3 men Marcus had captured were just the advance team. The real force had arrived. "Lord Mortimer Blackthorne and his private army," Whitmore explained with a satisfied smile. "Did you really think we would attempt something this ambitious without proper preparation?" The front door of the mansion burst open, and armed men flooded into the hallway. Marcus found himself vastly outnumbered, with Lady Cordelia's life hanging in the balance. The conspiracy was much larger and more dangerous than anyone had suspected. Lord Blackthorne entered the library, flanked by 2 bodyguards. He looked pleased with himself, like a chess player who had just achieved checkmate. "Captain Blackwood," Blackthorne said mockingly, "I had hoped you would prove less troublesome. Your reputation for solving difficult cases is apparently well-deserved." "This treasonous scheme will never succeed," Marcus declared, though he kept his sword lowered to avoid provoking Blackthorne's men. "Queen Victoria's government is too strong and the people too loyal." "The people are loyal to legends and symbols," Blackthorne replied. "When they see someone wearing the crown of starlight and carrying the scepter of truth, they'll believe that person is the rightful ruler, especially when we present evidence that Queen Victoria's family stole the throne from its legitimate heirs." Whitmore opened a leather satchel and removed several ancient documents. "These papers prove that the Ravencroft family never died out, as everyone believed. I am the last direct descendant of Queen Isabella herself, and these artifacts are my birthright." Marcus stared at the professor in shock. "You're claiming to be a Ravencroft?" "Alexander Whitmore is merely the name I adopted during my years in exile," the professor explained. "My real name is Alexander Ravencroft, great-great-grandson of Queen Isabella through her secret marriage to Sir William Ravencroft." The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. This wasn't just about money or power. It was about a man who genuinely believed he had a rightful claim to the throne of Valdoria, supported by nobles who had their own reasons for wanting to change the government. "Even if your genealogy is accurate," Marcus said, "you can't simply overthrow a legitimate monarch because of ancient bloodlines. The people of Valdoria deserve to choose their own government." "The people will choose," Blackthorne interjected. "When they see the ancient ritual performed under the full moon tomorrow night, they'll understand that Alexander is their true king." Lady Cordelia, who had remained silent during this exchange, finally spoke up. "You're all fools if you think this deception will work. The people of Valdoria aren't ignorant peasants who can be impressed by theatrical displays. They know the difference between legitimate government and ambitious pretenders." "We'll see about that," Whitmore replied coldly. In any case, it's too late to stop us now. The artifacts are already in place for tomorrow night's ceremony. And our supporters throughout the kingdom are prepared to declare their allegiance to the rightful king. Marcus's mind raced as he tried to think of a way to escape this seemingly hopeless situation. Blackthorn had too many men for direct confrontation, and the ritual was scheduled for the next evening. If the conspirators succeeded in their magical ceremony, the resulting chaos could tear the kingdom apart. But then Marcus remembered something crucial. During his investigation, he had learned that the 3 artifacts needed to be brought together for the ritual to work. If he could prevent the conspirators from assembling all 3 pieces, their entire plan would collapse. "Where exactly are you planning to hold this ceremony?" Marcus asked, trying to sound defeated and cooperative. Blackthorn smiled triumphantly. "On the sacred hill outside the capital, where Queen Isabella herself was crowned 2 centuries ago. The symbolism will be perfect, and thousands of people will be able to witness the restoration of the rightful monarchy." This was exactly the information Marcus needed. The sacred hill was an ancient site with only one road leading to the summit. If Sir Edmund and the royal guards could control that access point, they might be able to prevent the ceremony from taking place. "You're making a terrible mistake," Marcus said, hoping to plant seeds of doubt in the conspirators' minds. "Even if you manage to conduct your ritual, Queen Victoria won't simply abdicate. You'll be starting a civil war that could last for years." "Some things are worth fighting for," Whitmore replied firmly. "The throne of Valdoria belongs to the Ravencroft family, and I intend to reclaim it." Blackthorn gestured to his men. "Tie them both up securely. We'll take them with us tomorrow night as witnesses to our triumph. After the ceremony, they can carry news of the new king's coronation back to Queen Victoria." But as Blackthorn's men moved to restrain Marcus and Lady Cordelia, the sound of a horn echoed across the estate grounds. It was followed by the thunder of many horses and the shouts of armed men. Sir Edmund and the royal guard had finally arrived. "It seems your plans have encountered a complication," Marcus said with grim satisfaction. Blackthorn's confident expression faltered as he realized his escape route had been cut off. Through the library windows, they could see red and gold uniforms surrounding the estate. The royal guard had arrived in force, and there would be no easy escape for the conspirators. "Surrender now, and Queen Victoria might show mercy," Marcus offered. "Continue this madness, and you'll all face charges of high treason." But Blackthorn wasn't ready to give up. "We still have the artifacts, and we still have you as hostages. Edmund won't risk your lives by attacking this house." The next few hours became a tense standoff. Blackthorn's men barricaded themselves inside the mansion, while Sir Edmund's forces maintained a careful siege outside. Neither side was willing to make the first aggressive move, but everyone knew the situation couldn't continue indefinitely. As dawn approached, Marcus realized that time was working against the conspirators. Every hour that passed made it less likely they could reach the sacred hill in time for the full moon ceremony. If he could delay them long enough, their entire plot would collapse. "Blackthorn," Marcus said during a brief lull in the negotiations, "your men are tired and surrounded. Even if you escape from here, you'll never make it to the sacred hill alive. It's time to accept reality." But it was Professor Whitmore who provided the unexpected solution to the crisis. As the morning light grew stronger, he approached Marcus with a strange expression on his face. "Captain," Whitmore said quietly, "I need to tell you something important. Something that changes everything about this situation." Marcus studied the professor's face carefully. The man looked genuinely troubled, as if he was wrestling with a difficult decision. "I've been lying about the documents," Whitmore admitted. "The papers that supposedly prove my Ravencroft heritage are forgeries. I created them myself using my knowledge of historical manuscripts and ancient writing techniques." "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked suspiciously. Because I've realized that Blackthorn is using me for his own ambitions. He doesn't care about royal bloodlines or historical justice. He just wants power, and he's willing to destroy the kingdom to get it. This revelation changed everything. If Whitmore was willing to confess that his claim to the throne was fraudulent, the entire conspiracy would collapse. But Marcus needed to be certain this wasn't another deception. If you're telling the truth, Marcus said, then you need to announce this to everyone. Tell Blackthorn's men that they're fighting for a lie. Whitmore nodded slowly. You're right. I became so obsessed with my research into the Ravencroft family that I convinced myself I could become them. But I can't let innocent people die for my fantasy. The professor walked to the center of the library and raised his voice so everyone in the house could hear him. Lord Blackthorn, your men, everyone listen to me, Whitmore called out. I have an important announcement to make. As curious faces appeared in doorways throughout the mansion, Whitmore took a deep breath and began his confession. My name is not Alexander Ravencroft, he declared. I am Professor Alexander Whitmore, and I have been lying to you all. The documents I showed you are forgeries I created myself. I am not descended from Queen Isabella, and I have no legitimate claim to the throne of Valdoria. The effect of this announcement was immediate and dramatic. Blackthorn's men looked confused and angry, realizing they had been risking their lives for a fraud. Several of them began demanding explanations and arguing among themselves. Lord Blackthorn himself was furious. You lying fool, he shouted at Whitmore. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've told the truth, Whitmore replied calmly. Something I should have done from the beginning. The conspiracy was crumbling from within, but Marcus knew the danger wasn't over yet. Blackthorn still had armed men and stolen artifacts, and desperate criminals often became more dangerous when cornered. It's finished, Blackthorn, Marcus announced. Your men know they've been deceived, the royal guard has you surrounded, and your ritual is based on forged documents. Surrender now, and save yourself from additional charges. But Blackthorn was not a man who accepted defeat easily. His face was twisted with rage and frustration as he realized his grand conspiracy had been built on lies and deception. If I can't have the crown, Blackthorn snarled, then I'll make sure nobody else can either. He pulled out a small device that Marcus recognized with horror. It was an alchemical bomb, powerful enough to destroy the entire mansion and everyone inside it. Blackthorn had come prepared for the possibility of total failure, and he was willing to commit mass murder rather than face capture. Everyone out, Marcus shouted, drawing his sword and moving toward Blackthorn. He's going to destroy the house. The next few moments were chaos as people ran in all directions, trying to escape the mansion before Blackthorn could trigger his explosive device. Marcus fought his way through the fleeing crowd, determined to stop the madman before he could cause a catastrophe. But Lady Cordelia, who had remained remarkably composed throughout the entire crisis, had one final surprise for everyone. As Blackthorn raised the alchemical bomb above his head, preparing to smash it against the floor, Lady Cordelia revealed that she had managed to free herself from her bonds. With remarkable speed for a woman in her 60s, she grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the mantelpiece and struck Blackthorn's wrist. The bomb flew across the room and landed harmlessly in the empty fireplace, its trigger mechanism damaged beyond use. Marcus quickly subdued the stunned Blackthorn while Sir Edmund and his men poured into the mansion. The conspiracy was finally over, and the kingdom was safe from the threat of civil war. In the days that followed, the full extent of the plot was revealed through careful investigation. Lord Blackthorn was tried for high treason and sentenced to life imprisonment. Professor Whitmore received a lighter sentence in exchange for his cooperation and confession. The stolen artifacts were returned to their proper place in the royal collection, where they would remain under heavy guard. Lady Cordelia was honored by Queen Victoria for her courage and her family's generations of faithful service. The documents she had truly been protecting were historical records that helped scholars better understand Queen Isabella's actual reign, without any fraudulent claims about lost heirs. Captain Marcus Blackwood returned to the capital with enhanced reputation and the personal gratitude of Queen Victoria herself. The case of the stolen royal heirlooms had tested his skills as an investigator and his courage as a defender of the realm. As Marcus rode through the streets of the capital on his way to make his final report to the palace, he reflected on the lessons learned from this complex case. Greed and ambition could drive people to extraordinary lengths, but truth and justice ultimately prevailed when good people stood together against those who would destroy peace for their own selfish purposes. The kingdom of Valdoria remained secure under Queen Victoria's wise leadership, and the ancient artifacts of Queen Isabella had been restored to their rightful place in history. The circle of shadows had been exposed and defeated, ensuring that the people of Valdoria could continue to enjoy the peace and prosperity they deserved. The mystery of the stolen heirlooms was solved, but Marcus knew there would always be new challenges and new threats to face. That was the price of protecting a kingdom, and he was ready to pay it for as long as his strength and skill allowed him to serve his queen and country.